Hi, everybody. It's Steve Halpy Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we're going to continue our discussion on energy and how that concept resonates with the change grid and how it might overlay and all the other stuff we started talking about last time around. But David has brought something up, and that is how do you get back into this routine of taking care of where your physical energy comes from? So I thought that's a great place to begin. So, David, you want to set the stage a little bit for what's been going on
Well,
with physical energy?
one day I woke up. I was, oh, how old was I? 56, 57, and I
Mhm.
looked in the mirror and I was just dissatisfied.
Yeah.
So I started going to the gym, and I made it a habit. I would go every morning at 4:30,
Ooh.
that I was able to be where I needed to be by 8 a.m. And I
Hmm.
did that 7 days a week for 3 years without missing a single day,
Wow.
including Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, my birthday, you name it. I never missed a day.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I had great results. I actually put on a lot of weight. It was muscle weight, so I wasn't really that disappointed with it. But when the pandemic hit, I quit working out and I went from 250 to 204 pounds, and it just all fell off, and I lost that spark that would get me up every morning at 4 o'clock to get to the gym by 4:30, and I
Yeah.
just haven't been able to find it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we'll talk a little bit about how to get back into it, get back into the program. I'll be more than happy to give you a little bit of guidance from what the change grid would have to say about that situation. But Shags has just chatted something over to everyone. The problem with humans, Shags, go ahead, unmute and share it if you want. I don't know if you're in a place you can talk, but please
Yeah,
feel
well,
free.
the problem with with me and humans in particular, as I've noticed, is that the older we get, the closer friends our internal organs become with the insulating fat layer.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah. No,
it's
it's
hard.
really
It's hard to say goodbye.
it is. It's really hard to say goodbye.
I
Um, and you get colder too. I just have to say, you get colder
am cold all the time,
all the
T.
time.
I am cold in the summer.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. There you go. Oh, Brian's joined in. Boris, hey, hi, gentlemen. Oh, howdy, howdy, howdy. All right. So what I want to do was kind of return to this idea about this map of the human energies, and I've been looking a bit into it over the past 2 days. But let's go ahead and start by giving some guidance to how do you reclaim a behavior that was very much at the core of your physical energy. From last time, I remember one of the things that we talked about was how the physical energy ends up dictating the availability, accessibility, applicability, whatever, of all the other three. If you don't have the physical energy to do anything mental, well, mental is going to suffer. So you need that physical energy in place for the rest of it to work the way it's supposed to work. And by the way, sticking with what Boris kind of labeled it as, this in-grid side we now define as more of the social energy resonating with the amiable energy we've talked about in the past. And then we're going to move their spiritual to the middle. By the way, we didn't talk about it, but last time around when I was looking at their definitions of what each of these energies is, they said spiritual energy was about having a mission, a purpose, a drive. And I do want to make sure that I talk about where that is, because part of it can be on the in-grid side and part of it can be on the out-grid side, but it's definitely here to match their definition of what spiritual may be. So nevertheless, set that aside for just a second. How do we go about reclaiming that physical energy? Now, we talked about that a lot of the contributing factors to physical energy are things that we would all consider to be blinding flashes of the obvious, because we've been around this kind of content for a very long time. We may very well have taught these kinds of content points. But things like you got to get plenty of sleep, and you have to eat good food and the right amount of good food, and you have to avoid the kinds of behaviors that are going to damage your health. So don't stay up too late, don't drink too much, don't smoke, don't whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, one of them is this idea about keeping yourself in motion, keeping yourself active. So I guess at its most discipline form, it's about working out or having some sort of healthy pursuit that exercises your heart. Probably more important than anything else, but heart, muscles, joints, balance, those kinds of things all become important. So as we get older, to the point Shag's made, our organs become closer friends with our insulating fat. They don't want to see it go. In fact, they've invited a lot of that fat into the organs themselves. And so you're absolutely right. There is another element of an obstacle as we get older that has to be addressed and overcome, as the case may be. So, how to get yourself back to going to the gym? So, David, are you of the same mindset that I am? That as much money as I have spent trying to create a gym in my home, it just doesn't really compel me to do a workout at home. Are you in the same thing? You can get a little bit done once in a while, but as far as setting up a formal exercise program inside of your household, this has not worked out, or what? Nope. Nope. And you guys, the rest of you can chime in as well about what your experience is. And so I believe that the very first step in getting back into the swing of things is doing the very first step of going to the gym. And that is literal. Just go to the gym. Didn't say you had to work out when you get there. I'm just saying you have to go to the gym. So physically drive the car to the gym. Now, I didn't even say get out of the car and walk into the front door. I just said drive to the gym. And so I promise you, if you drive to the gym and you're sitting there for just a second, you go like, well, I might as well go in. And then once you're in, you're going to go like, well, I might as well do a little bit of whatever. If you can just get yourself doing that on a most days of the week kind of basis, you tell me how long it's going to be before you'll be back into the swing of things and exercising.
You
And
know, I did that, and I went one early Thursday morning. I had a meeting at 8 o'clock, and I found myself kind of sweating and just somehow I had a reaction to the workout, and it impacted my 8 o'clock meeting, and I kind of went, well, I can't have that.
and then use that as a justification for
Yep,
not working out at your normal preferred workout times.
yep.
All right. Well, you saying that, the first thing I'm concerned about is, were you triggering some sort of an arrhythmia, some sort of a respiratory kind of a thing? Was your idea of a first workout back at the gym was just too much, too fast?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, I
You weren't
did.
out there powerlifting, you know.
No, no, no. I started out with really light weights and only a few sets and only a half an hour worth of exercise.
All right. Well, then maybe it needed to have been 15 minutes or 10 minutes or one exercise, one set of each exercise. The point is that that particular day, that particular workout, rather than having a very uplifting and energizing and health enhancing kind of effect, it's something that you carried with you all the way through to 8 o'clock at a meeting. And during that meeting, you were feeling what?
Just the effects of the workout, maybe a little sweating, a little tired, a little distracted, kind of,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, if I take those words, Brian, you're about to unmute. You already are unmuted. What we're going to say to you is that being tired is not so much an issue, but this idea about sweating, that means that something is triggering your metabolic rate and all the things to go with it to continue. That means increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. What else, Brian? Jump in. You're the physician.
Yeah, well, you're spot on. That's why what's interesting to me a lot of times when we're talking about these kinds of behavioral change, right? That's connected to somatic nervous system. Somatic nervous system is part of the ANS, the autonomic nervous system. So these things happen automatically. And again, emotions are designed to pass through us. So a lot of times when people are looking for behavior change, they start with the behavior, but really, I think you have to start upstream at the identity. I'll give you an
Oh,
example
okay.
of that. I
Mhm.
was always the athlete of the family, and I was a kind of athlete, I'm somewhat like Tia, perfectionist. So I was kind of athlete, didn't have off season. So as it gets older, playing football or soccer as it's called in the States here, I had to learn how to pace myself because my attitude was never to just win. I wanted to kick your ass, right? Now, doing that and then the recovery process when you get older is not as fast. They don't go together. So I'll be experiencing the same thing that David just said he experienced because I didn't pace myself. So changing that identity to, okay, how can I engage and do something that will be sustainable over time in this so-called afternoon of life over 50? That's how I had to change the game for myself and experience. Doesn't mean I had to dial back the quality, but
Now,
I had to dial
two
back the
years ago,
identity.
2 years ago, Brian, I was just 65 years old, 64 years old, and I bench pressed 330 pounds and was doing sets of 12 with 100 pounds in each hand on the incline bench. And, recovering well and feeling good and everything else. What possible change could have happened in 2 years?
A lot could have changed and metabolically because it's always looking to balance itself. And so that's why always monitoring the metabolic side of things in terms of blood pressure, in terms of breathing, in terms of all these different kinds of, like if you wear a heart rate variability monitor, it monitors about 20 different metrics that are key to sustainability and overall metabolic health. Just that. So, these things, again, they're connected to the ANS. So they happen automatically. You don't have to ask it to happen, but there's signals that definitely should be looked into.
Well, I'll start slow and see how it goes.
Well, exactly
Right.
that. And it may very well be, this idea about working on your identity. I can certainly say that if I went to my workouts with my trainer, envisioning myself and imagining myself as a 26-year-old competitive bodybuilder, I'm setting myself up for a whole heap of pain and trouble. That is not who I am. So I think that's part of it. What's the new definition of the healthy, vibrant David that you envision wanting to return to? It can be different, but it can be equally compelling to
Yeah,
what
I
you
don't,
want.
I don't, I don't need to lift the heavy weights anymore. I
Thank God,
probably,
man, I've never bench pressed 325 pounds once ever.
yeah, it's always been a passion of mine. The heavier the weights, the more attractive they are to me. And, so I just push myself a little bit more each workout to increase the poundage and everything else. But I am going to be 67 in March. And I probably should honor that with maybe an adaptation of my approach.
I would agree, because I'm wondering when you went to the gym that morning, did you go to the gym as someone who had been down grid and decided to move slightly up grid, have a little bit of accountability, change the task, see a little bit of a vision? Or did you approach that workout as an out grid driven driver?
No, I was more downgrid.
Okay, good, good,
It
good,
was more
good.
downgrid. I realize the impact that extreme exercise can have on your body. And I'm not a kid anymore.
Yeah.
So I was a bit downgrid in my approach. I walked on the treadmill for 20 minutes at 3 miles an hour
Oh,
and then did a couple of sets of curls and a couple of sets of light bench presses, and that's all I did.
yeah. That's all I did. Okay. So anyone that want to chime in a comment, 20 minutes at 3 miles per hour. What do you think of that as as a first aerobic workout?
Yeah. And how long has it been since you've done something like that?
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that might have been a
That's a
little
bit,
bit
but
too
David,
much.
my routine workout, I'll get on the treadmill for 30 minutes, but 2.5 miles an hour. Now I am at a 5% incline, but
Oh,
my
all
trainers
right.
keep telling me go to a 15% incline, get to 3.5 miles an hour. It's just kind of like I'm happy. This is good. I'm fine
Yeah.
with that.
It might have been a little bit of a shock for your system because we have muscle memory, and
Yeah.
your organs have memory. So you have perioceptive, pre-perioceptive. So these are memories. So it might take a little bit to just get back to where you were, and
Yeah.
then that way you can reintroduce, micro experiment, micro workouts. And
Right,
that way you
exactly. I
trigger
mean,
it.
David, if you were to enter competition right now, you'd know you'd be competing at the senior masters level, right?
Yep.
Okay, imagine who you're up on stage with. Okay, they don't bench press 325 pounds. So, so yeah, I think that that's the place to begin. Is really get to Brian's point, get very clear about what this new identity is, this new image, and then approach it with just the right pace. And I think you'll be good. You know this though. Once you're back in the routine becomes self-sustaining.
Yep.
So it's just those couple of weeks or so to get yourself back in that routine.
That's it.
Yeah, that's all you got to
Well,
do.
thank you, T, and thank you, Brian, for all your
Thank
support.
you.
Certainly welcome. By the way, you might also learn that working out very early in the morning is no longer the ideal time for you to be working out. So if you just set the expectation that just says, every day I'm going to drive to the gym, doesn't matter what time of the day it is, just do that. And, you might very well find out that too early in the morning is just plain too early in the morning.
Yeah.
All righty. Okay, so going back to this idea about where these energies are actually plotting, I have to tell you that I had a very huge aha sort of experience looking at what we talked about last time around. I wish Tim were on the call so he could actually hear me say this. But obviously that, as we were talking about that model about their four energies, all of us were kind of going, well, this overlays on the change grid very easily. And we can even tell you what range on the change grid we confine this to, because it was all inside of the green circle. And then we started having our thoughts and wonderings about, well, what happens if you're between the green and the red? What happens if you're in a danger zone? So if anything, we were able to kind of absorb, assimilate what they presented to us, at least on the surface, very, very easily. Do we agree with that? That it was kind of like, that was an easy merge. Now, we did enhance it, I think, by letting, as Boris was pointing out, no, you do have this social kind of energy that has to be taken into account. And so we added some stuff to it. But even though I feel like it is a very, I don't want to be disrespectful, it's a very tiny subset of the full range of mergings that we've completed to date, it still brought something very powerful to the awareness. It was still able to contribute at least one major thing. Do any of you have any thoughts about what that major thing may be that it was there and we've talked about it. It's even there in a word, but we didn't really put the emphasis on it. Okay, now I'm babbling, but anyone come up with any aha? Could just be my delusion or.
Well, I have one, but I don't think it's what you're referring to. So I'm going to leave
You go
it
ahead.
for now, but we can
Oh,
come
you go
back
ahead.
to it. Well, I kind of view the change grid in a three-dimensional approach more
Yep.
than a two-dimensional approach.
Yep.
I see that pink dot in the center. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the
Yep.
four red dots are your foundation and they're kind of at the base level. But the pink dot is a much higher level energy. It's that self-actualization piece.
Right.
And so if you think of it like a pyramid, that's the tip of the pyramid right there. And the other four are the base level energies that are, and there's a gravitational, I think, a natural gravitational pull from the base to that top piece. And
a pull that is being exerted by the top on the four base corners.
And I think vice versa. I think
excellent.
what happens is, I think if you're too far out grid, that's where you start having those issues, right? Well, there's that gravitational pull that's pulling you there. And even if you know that you need to be much more centered and balanced, you're not able to get there because you're dealing with a more primal need.
Well, right, and there you go. Or in addition to the primal needs, it's also that our values change, our goals, motivations, the level of importance, because that third dimension we tend to look at would be importance. But this was illustrated by David's point. you wanted to get back to here, but the pull of whatever being downgraded and not going to the gym kind of gave you was, at least for a while, greater than the pull that working out represented to you. Does that make sense? Yeah, we talked about this when we were kind of describing change as involving two rubber bands, one that attaches you to the old way of doing things and one that attaches you to the new way of doing things. And as you move towards one, the pull of the other becomes stronger and the pull of the direction you were going becomes weaker. And so that's why most people fail to reach whatever their ultimate goal happens to be, but can get to some successive approximation of the desired outcome.
And see, that's what explains the brain processing, right? So if the brain's first order of business is to preserve and conserve energy,
Yep.
then the first order of business is always the status quo, or whatever we condition ourselves based on identity, behaviors, and habits. And so the synaptic pruning process says that what you begin to do is incorporate new neural pathways. So in other words, new behaviors. It just doesn't happen overnight because the neuroplasticity, just like going to the gym, grows in rest. But you need a certain repetition, certain amount of repetition there, a certain amount of alertness and intensity when you're engaged. So the quality matters. And then the more you keep repeating that quality process or whatever it is you're doing, now you're building new pathways that become the more dominant than the old.
And let me add to that, that in order to make what you've just said connect very easily to what we explored in spiral dynamics, what you've just said is that as we are making these new relationships, we're making these new insights, these new understandings, we are creating new neural pathways. At a certain point in time, those new neural pathways have to be passed on to offspring as genetic code, right? It becomes part of the next generation. And maybe it's not that fast. Maybe it takes 4 or 5, 6 successive approximations before you go like, wow, this generation views life and issues in a very different way. And it's core to how they are. So that would really much support what the evolution of values is all about, which is what the whole spiral dynamic thing is really all about. And so I think that that's a really interesting thing. So did I just make something up, or is it true that sooner or later these adjustments we're making in our neural pathways at the local level, if you will, can sooner or later be communicated to the species?
I think so. I think so. Just look at how generations in the past did some really simple things, and now they weren't forced to deal with, incessant production and things that we're faced now. And so, we're always overwhelmed. And so this idea of, amygdala hijacking and always being under duress, burnt out and these kinds of things, that people didn't have to deal with this in generations past.
No. And in fact, I have a friend who was working on his dissertation in communications. And one of the things that he observed was that as we progress, if what we're doing is really progress, but as we progress, humanity is becoming increasingly visually oriented and visually driven. Where if we go back not even 100 years, it would have been auditory is what was really more prominent, more exercised, more relied upon. And his whole point was that, yeah, and you can see that the driving force behind it was the type of media available and the consumption of the ease at which that media can be consumed. And so 100 years ago, did radio exist 100 years ago? I don't know when radio started, but I think around the 1900s, current turn of the century, is that when we started having radio broadcasts? Well, for a very long time, can you imagine what a central device was inside of a household? Someone was the first one on the block to get a radio. And then there was programming on the radio, and people would gather around the radio. That's where they got their news from, etc. So what sense is being exercised is the auditory sense. Well, as media changed, or rather technology changed, then media could change. And now the messaging is extremely visual.
Yeah, that's dangerous because the the eyes are the only organs that have direct connectivity to the brain stem. And so the things that we process visually, and this is why they use visualization for even like athletes who come back from a so-called career-ending injury, the brain doesn't filter between a so-called real image or fake image, right? There's no filter for it. So we cast that labeling and meaning onto it. And so now if you look at the extremes in behaviors, you know, in terms of leadership, it's all tribal. And we see this on TV. And so this becomes kind of like normalized, like a slow pressure cooker. And people growing up now think this is the way leadership is.
Yeah.
So we lose the fact that in most longevity studies, support community relationships are a key factor, even beyond the health and medical side.
Right.
I think something that Brian just brought up is very, very important. And this idea, if you go back to the radio analogy, the auditory component requires you to have a sense of creativity on the input side. So when you're listening to a radio station, it makes you feel a certain way. And people do things because of how they feel, has a major impact. I don't think that happens with the visual inputs the same. And I think that's what's lost in society today is people have lost the ability because they're interacting digitally and visually more than they're not building relationships. That kinesthetic piece is missing somehow.
Yeah, you're spot on. In fact, those are senses that are processed live in candid camera. So in other words, the brain assumes if you see it, that is real. So you see this little wiggly thing moving and, you know, it's some distance away and your brain perceives snake, although it's a rope and the wind being affected by wind, you're just going to go with the snake and you respond to it. Because as for that visual image to connect, it's live and candid camera. But if you don't have a filtering system, again, then whatever you see is live, and that's what people are dealing with today.
Let me add to that there's also a speed factor. When
exactly.
we are relying upon the auditory channel, we can only receive information at the rate that the words are being spoken. And along the way, we're going to make our own interpretations. We're going to create visualizations of what someone is saying to us, etc. But if we're in a visually dominated world, where those visuals are being provided to us, a picture is worth 1,000 words, depending on the images they're showing us, regardless of what the narration might be saying at that time. Those visuals are communicating far, far, far more information to us than the words themselves.
Yeah, and it's faster. So, you know, those things are connected to the somatic nervous system too. So what the somatic nervous system says, for every thought, an image, emotion we experience, something physiologically happens to the body, literally.
Right.
So this idea of how you feel matters. But again, if you're conditioned to ignore it, then you can't use that as relevant data to help you process what it is that you're feeling.
And people are growing increasingly numb to visuals, and what used to shock people may now be considered to be, you know, suitable for prime time, you know. So a lot of things are changing as we emphasize a particular way of gathering that information. Now, it's interesting how where would that all plot on the change grid? But I want to throw out my aha for everyone. So for the question I have for you to kind of get this going is, what does the change grid reveal? So anyone throw something out? What does the change grid tell us?
The level of productive tension a person is
exactly right. Level of productive tension. What else were you going to say?
In a specific situation, in a specific time frame.
In a specific situation. So now we've had this layer about these 16 energies for a very long time, and we have this layer about the intensities on very high. But my aha, which really was a blinding flash of the obvious, a BFO, a blinding flash of the obvious, when we were going through those energies was, well, what's the difference between in-grid energy and out-grid energy? Yes, the change grid tells us about the level of tension, but that's a vertical trend that is being, that's the result of your perceptions. Well, there's also a horizontal result. that is coming across just as powerfully as the vertical result. What's the horizontal result?
Risk.
The level, okay, risk for sure out here, but from in-grid to out-grid, what's this line? What's the heart line really about? What's this quadrant called?
The outgrid.
Yeah, and what's the other, what kind of energy lives there?
Driver.
The driver energy. So yeah, power for the level of tension, absolutely. And so I remember saying this. In fact, when I was looking at my old writings, I actually found plenty about this, where we said that the difference between in-grid and out-grid is drive. The difference between down-grid and up-grid is tension. So by
you're in grid, you're more of a passenger.
You are far more of a passenger. I mean, think about this. You have very little drive. There's no motivation. There's no impetus. There's no intentionality. That all those words that just rattled off are occurring as we move further and further out grid along this idea about drive. And that, by the way, would also resonate with these intensity little waves, if you will, that the whatever power, stress that someone is experiencing very far in grid just doesn't have much intensity to it. It might be there, but it's just not really expressing itself very powerfully. And as we move further out grid, and these bands get to be taller, and then you start to go, all right, I get it. What's happening is that this is power, if you will, but this experience of power here where I'm squiggling around is very different than this experience of power very far in grid. The intensity is what's changing. So drive or intensity, I think, could be good words there. I think another one could be motivation, but we'd have to be very careful because motivated to do what, I think, can affect it a little bit. I mean, I'm highly motivated to nap. Being highly motivated to nap is not an out-grid experience. So,
so T, I have a comment on that.
Yeah.
And there's a diagram that I was sharing with Brian a little while ago, and it kind of matches what you're saying here, because to me, the horizontal area, although you're calling it drive, to me, it's all about self. It's about me, versus the tension is about others.
Well, that's a very interesting thing to throw into the mix. That is a new thought for us to process. So repeat it again so we can kind of lock
so the horizontal axis is all about me, my motivation, my drive, my intentions, and all of that, versus the vertical axis is about the tension with others. It's an others focus.
Others.
It's an external thing to me.
Okay, so are you thinking the horizontal one is about internal factors?
Correct.
The vertical one is about external factors.
That's right.
Now that I can certainly see how that would overlay. But if we pull up a layer on the radial trends on the change grid, and I'm happy to do that. I wanted to show you where we think self-orientation, other orientation, information orientation, where these things tend to live. And the interesting point of it is that a certain level of self-orientation exists on all areas of the change grid. All areas of the change grid has a certain self. And as we move towards the center, we are able to add another focus. And so if I am between the green line and the red line, not only am I self-oriented, I've now made room for others. I'm self and other oriented. And if I move inside the green circle, now I can appreciate truth and reality and all those good, undeniable kinds of real stuff that's going on. That's information is what we're putting there. So I open myself up to being information oriented in addition to other oriented and self-oriented. So that'll be a very interesting thing to plot. But your thought about that being on the horizontal, being on the heart line, is very much driven by some sort of internal motivator. That doesn't resonate improperly with me. That's really good. We don't really have a name. We call this the heart line. We've never had a name for the vertical line because we just talk about it as the level of tension someone's experiencing. But yeah, interesting. Well, now to kind of just bring this to closure, I thought, well, then maybe we could say, maybe we could say that if you add up someone's level of tension and someone's level of drive, those two things put together equals energy. So let me throw this in here. The tension plus drive equals energy. It's really not adding them together. It's really about the relationship between them. So maybe it really is more of a that we're looking at.
Would it not be not just energy, but it's where are you focusing your energy?
Well, that's absolutely true, but that's where we go to the addition of the next element, because remember, we have 4 dimensions. The importance element dictates how much of our energy we're going to direct to a particular situation. So I can have an ideal placement on the change grid when it comes to tension and drive. I could be in the perfect energy, but inside of each of those energies, we still have to look at the range of importance. So if I'm a driven driver and you've got me doing something that I deem as unimportant, what's the likelihood of me getting it done, even though I'm a driven driver? And that would be as compared to something that the driven driver views as being extremely important to them. So ultimately, I think that this importance metric is going to really dictate how much energy. So maybe tension and drive gives us the quality of energy. I don't know so much it's a quantity of energy, but we could look at, maybe it is a quantity of energy. I don't know. I'm not there yet, but there's definitely about what's the quality of the energy when we talk about the driven driver energy versus the expressive driver energy. There's some difference there in the qualities that we would associate with energy. So the shape it takes, maybe the form it takes, the personality it might take on, whatever you want to put there. So this is giving me the potential energy. How much energy is going to get directed to something is driven by importance. But here's the other one. Size is how much energy something will consume. And so if you're going to give me something that I'm well positioned to do, and it's profoundly important to me to get it done, it may very well, or I may very well be willing to relinquish all of the energy I might have available to me. You know, sooner or later, we might need to transfer all power to life support. When you get the metaphor there. So that's where this was my kind of aha, that if we said that the result of our perceptions of tension and drive is not just tension and it's not just drive. We can look at each one of the levels of tension, we can look at the level of drive, but if we want to look at these two things in their relationship, we would be looking then at what is the energy that someone has around it. And then I need to just throw in here something about personality, although that's not really fair. It's persona. And persona, and what did I just say? Quality. I guess quality.
All 3 of these are, I would say, parallel the first law of thermodynamics that says energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred.
Yep. But okay, remember last time around we said that if you are someone who is depleted in physical energy, you may redirect energy from other places in order to take care of whatever the physical requirement at hand may be. So I think that's kind of matching with you. This is what I'm saying. It's like when I'm looking at this, if I just said, just be at the change grid at layer 0. So 0 importance whatsoever, 0 importance. I still have to place somewhere on where drive and energy are going to come together. I'm going to plot somewhere where my perceptions for ability and challenge are going to intersect. So that tells me the energy I have around it, but that doesn't mean I'm exhibiting that energy. That's why maybe it's more about the potential energy, or I don't know.
Let me phrase this a little different than you have it and tell me if this makes sense. Under importance, I would say that this is how much energy I'm willing to commit, be directed, versus size is how much energy I perceive is required to accomplish something.
Right, because I've got to be willing to incur whatever comes along with size. Is that matching what you're saying? There's a price to be paid.
Yeah, this is the perception. And so again, my perception of how much energy is going to be required to do something, which could be right or wrong, is the size. And the importance is how much I'm actually willing to commit.
I agree.
You know?
I agree. And what's driving that importance could be a great many different things. Is it some sort of an expectation that's coming from outside of me, in which case I maybe need to be upgraded to make it happen, or is it something that's coming from within me? And it's really something that I'm going after because I want to feel a sense of achievement. I want to do whatever. It's important to me. Well, you're absolutely right. I think this is all about how much energy. Sooner or later, though, to stay with the model we were looking at, we have to recognize that energy is finite.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can only do whatever as long as I've got energy to support it. And so that's why I'm thinking like, it's not only how much energy I'm willing to commit, it might also be about energy availability from that. And if it's important enough to me, um, I may what do I want to say, channel, I may commandeer whatever energy is in other places that I could say, you got to wait, or whatever the case is. So I think you're right. It's about a willingness to commit it, but it's also about this, I don't know.
Well, to your point, T, if you can pull up the change grid for a second,
Sure.
and I'll show you something that was like a light bulb for me, just hit me. If you're in the center of the change grid, directly in the green area, and you're balanced, you have the capacity to redirect your energy easily.
Yes.
If you're all the way out grid, down grid, in grid, doesn't matter. If you're all the way out in the extremes,
Yep.
your capacity to make those changes is very limited. Because you have to return to balance before you can actually reallocate the energy.
Right. You're absolutely right there. And so this is when we're basically saying that model we were looking at really lives inside of the green circle. And inside of the green circle, I can say, look, the perfect place is to always have a balance of these energies, or how about each of these energies being equally funded by the physical energy? You know, it's got enough to share. So everything can be operated.
If you view that green circle as the field of energy, maybe I'm getting too out of the box here, but if you move that circle all the way down grid, right at the edge, you've moved all my energy into such a place that there's no way I can bring in balance and reallocate the energy I need to what I'm trying to accomplish.
No,
so
you are absolutely correct. That is what that's what we're talking about when we talk about what happens between the green circle and the red circle. So when I think about having to deal with a situation that puts me between the green and the red in any direction, it's all, it's going to be different based on the situation, but nevertheless, you're still between the green and the red. I know that all of my balanced energy is about to be impacted. So it may very well be that if I have some sort of an upgrid energy, I'm in a real threatening situation. I'm in a very heightened emotional thing that's demanding attention. It may very well be that I will direct more of my physical energy to that. I may very well shut down social energy altogether. And as far as the mental energy goes, I've got to become a little bit more instinctual about what's going on. So I can certainly see how movement outside of the green circle is going to begin to pull that level of energy into I'm going to say, hopefully workable situation.
Right, but
take your point at the end.
What
I'm in a
happens
danger zone. Forget it.
Yeah, and that's my point, T, is if you're all the way out in the danger zone,
Right.
You can't even make those changes.
Oh, no, you can't anymore.
Incapable.
Well, let's say this. Let's say that I'll definitely agree with 3 or 4 out of the 5. I'm just wondering, which one do you think is going to cure us? Because sooner or later we have to reset, and we have to do something to get back to reclaiming our center. I think that's what all of us do for a living. So, what energy is really going to be the one that's going to step up and say, all right, we have to rebuild. We have to back off. We have to reconnect, rebuild. What energy is doing that?
It's got to be the driver energy.
Driver.
Gotta be the driver energy. Hopefully inside of the green circle, there's just enough battery powered left for our body to say, we're going to go into energy conservation mode for a while. I'm going to shut you down and put you to sleep. See what happens when I let you be awake? You know,
But is that a driver energy that is
it's a highly amiable driver.
aware?
Oh,
Because
fully.
sometimes, because again, some people can work themselves into straight up. The body is smartly designed to know when to shut itself off,
Right. Well,
even
in
if you're
fact,
not
Brian,
smart enough
based on
to.
just what you're saying, look at what's happening with the engagement rings. What the body is saying in that moment is that it is time for us to at least temporarily disengage. We'll remain
Right.
fully aware. We're going to become more aware of what we've learned because we've become exhausted or tapped out or whatever. And so it is very much still a driver energy. And again, if I went to
Got it.
tertiary, it still has analytics, it's got all that. But this energy is saying like, no, we in order for you to find you again, someone's got to come in and say self-care is what we need right now.
Right.
So we got
Right.
to stay focused on
Okay.
taking care of you. That's a very amiable kind of a quality. And it's perfectly okay stepping into intention because it's stepping in grid with that intention. So it's not going to forget what it needs to be aware of. It knows it was engaged in doing something, but you know, there's a reason why we don't operate 24 hours a day.
We definitely need more of this because with the people I've been interviewing as of late, these healthcare leaders, high performing, when I'm asking them things like, what do you do when you have an extra 5, 10 minutes? Their condition, I think I feel it. I have to have something else to do. I'm like, okay, have to sounds like very systemic language. Why do you have to something else to do? Why not, you know, uh, recuperate from the last activity?
Yeah, we all know people like that. If we pull out the Enneagrams, I can even tell you the numbers they are. So, but yeah, no, it's absolutely true. Um, and we can always look at personalities as well, and how we feel about personality testing. It's very interesting. Can't pass one up, but I don't think it's really telling me the whole story. I think we're a lot better off when we start looking at these individual situations. And then if you want to look at where they are energetically, that's all great. So if we thought like, well, the whole change grid is really a map of energy, we've always said the change grid is a map of responses, all the different ways that a human could respond to a given situation. There's a place for it everywhere on the change grid or somewhere on the change grid. So I still feel like we've always been talking about energy. We've just never labeled it so definitively. And even though we had that energy layer we've been talking about for years and years, it never really connected to me that was what, that's how the drive result gets pulled into play, the drive, the motivation. And I know I'm babbling, but it's like I had this aha, and now this whole process of merging that brilliance, it's a taxing exercise in and of itself. So, all right. So now there was another little element that came into to play, another little aha I'll present, and that is that in the worst case scenario, the energy that must survive is which? Okay, just be a survivalist here. In the worst possible case scenario, which energy is going to be the only one that's going to, matter moving forward? Which one do I have to protect at all costs?
The center.
The center leaning what direction?
Leaning toward power.
Leaning outgrid, leading towards
leading
power.
outgrid.
Exactly right. It is ultimately that physical energy that has to become the primary focus. And I can give you extremes of this that illustrate it very easily. I promise you, when someone is nearing death, their body and their mind isn't really all that much up here into emotional stuff. I mean, they might be feeling something, but I'm talking about the body at a certain point is going to say, just forget all that, forget all this, just forget that. We need to stay alive. I need every piece of energy to be pulled into play to accomplish one and only one task. And that is make sure that we continue to breathe. Our heart continues to beat. We continue to live. So I know that was dramatic, but do you agree with me that at a sooner or later, everything else can be sacrificed in order for the physical to survive? Brian, am I right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, the
Yep.
behind the scenes stuff about how that's happening biologically. But I know that when I worked in a hospital setting, and very, very frequently we had to watch people at the end of life. And sadly, I did most of my hospital work at Children's Hospital. So the end of life I was watching was for a very young person. And I can tell you at a certain point in time, their mind might still be having visions and thoughts that I hope are bringing them great comfort or whatever. But as far as what's happening physically in the here and now, it's really all about that body just trying to fight off whatever is threatening it. And you know, sometimes that battle is lost. And
So
so
T,
there
to
you
your
go.
point, am I correct in saying that somebody that is struggling mentally, maybe on the verge of suicide, would be completely in grid?
They may be completely in grid,
Mm-hmm.
completely in grid.
Yeah.
Um, I would say to you that suicide could occur off grid, but that's from coming from a highly reactive kind of place. Like they didn't really intend on doing it, they just wanted to get attention or whatever. And I do believe that down grid people commit, what I would say, accidental suicide, you know?
Mm.
They're not really going out there to do something, but they've become so careless in their self-care. They've become slovenly. They've become alcohol dependent, drug dependent, whatever. Well, sooner or later, that could equal death. And I don't mind saying to you that they've committed suicide. They just committed suicide over a very long period of time. And finally, it just added up to everything physically vanishing, gone. So, no, I think you're right. When I think about people who are actually committing suicide, they're trying to find the ultimate way out. And this is a retreat into a very different kind of world. So, outgrid people can commit suicide as well, but they're going for the drama. They're going for the survival. You know, sometimes I wonder if we were to really examine the psychological state of executives before they jump off. If you notice, a lot of people are jumping off of buildings. So
Mhm.
you just go like, of all the ways someone could end their life, I do not want to end mine in a way that says, for a number of seconds, I'm going to be fully aware that I've done something really stupid. You know, that's not how I want to go. Well,
No
these
going
people,
back.
you know, these people jump off the building. And so they're doing it because they feel the threat of living is far greater than the threat of dying, where these people are committing suicide because they feel hopeless and helpless and all those kinds of things, which makes you wonder why bother living life. So it's a different thing. So do I believe suicide can occur anywhere? Yeah, I could build, not the center, obviously, but you know, in any of these extremes, but I do believe it belongs more in grid than anywhere else. Anyway, about other thoughts to add to
Is
that? Or
that an
agree,
unconscious
disagree?
thing? Is
What's
that I
that?
remember a social psych is it an unconscious thing? I remember a
Well,
social psychologist telling me before, at least from her opinion or expertise, she said people who commit suicide are rather unconscious because when they snap to, they'll be like, "Oh, I'm cutting myself" or something like
right.
that.
Yep.
So they're in this unconscious state.
Yeah,
But
and
like if you think about the downgrade though, that's different, I would think.
well, I don't know if it's so much conscious or unconscious. I do believe as we move further down grid, we become increasingly unconscious about what's going on. But remember that even if I just look at the change grid defined by 0, 0, and 1, 1, just look at that, there's a whole change grid inside of there. And so there could still be that depression or whatever can exist very, very far in grid. It's just not intense. Here it's very intense. Here it's very subtle. So
I think we have a lot of people downgrade that are, I call them dead men walking.
well, yeah, these are
Because
zombies.
think
Yeah,
about
these
it,
people
like
are on autopilot. No, that's
73% of the world's population suffers from metabolic lifestyle condition. That's a lot of people,
a
right?
lot of
That are
people.
just tolerating chronic disease,
Yeah, and
things that
that's a
you can't
downgrade
control.
result because of their lack of, because they're tolerating it, they're also encouraging it. And so the spiral.
Brian, could you say again what you just said, that 73% of people do what?
The world's population is suffering from chronic or non-communicable lifestyle conditions. So the diabetes, the obesity, and that's the world's population, not just the United States. So that's a lot.
And
Because
those are
we're
all
like
Yeah.
8.9 billion or 9 billion world population now.
It's
Oh, is it? I
because
thought
food
maybe 7.
comes to us rather than us going to the food.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yep.
Don't have to go out and harvest. We don't have to go hunt and gather.
Yeah. And boy, that's work. I got to tell you, living in the desert right now, all the fruit trees are in full fruit. It's like, who could ever eat this many oranges? Who could ever even, but you got to get them out of the way or it's going to be bugs everywhere. The other point I wanted to just add, and I'll just throw this out here as a seed, but in addition to these levels of tension, these levels of energy, we talk specifically about the threshold of activation and the threshold of delegation. And we've talked about how the degree to which those thresholds deviate from the heart line equals the degree to which dysfunction is interfering with our thought process, or our thought process is interfering with functioning properly. And so we talked about that a lot. We've said, maybe the greatest thing we do for our clients is help them lower their threshold of activation, raise their threshold of delegation, so they take care of things sooner or whatever. Well, as we started talking about how the physical energy is the one that governs the others, will ultimately be the last survivor when things are going on, that movement is constantly rolling out grid in our giant bubble. We talked about that last time. That would tell me that as I move further and further out grid, I am becoming better and better at doing whatever it is that needs to be done. I'm trying to find efficiencies. I'm trying to find things that are effective. I'm trying to find that whole elegance. And I'm trying to be more responsive in the moment so that I'm not waiting for external factors to do something. And I certainly don't want any moss to grow under our feet. So what I'm saying and how I'm saying it should be very descriptive of this area of the change here that I'm squiggling around on. And so I'm wondering, based on that insight, could a case be made that as we move further out grid to a certain point, that our thresholds of activation and our thresholds of delegation become increasingly well positioned, in fact, coincidental on the heart line? So we can say 1010, which is the healthiest expression of the driver energy, in all likelihood, has both their thresholds of activation and delegation darn close to that point. So when you're here, you are quick to take action and quick to delegate. It is quick to direct, quick to delegate, quick to direct, to delegate. Is that a hallmark, you would say, of a healthy 1010, of a healthy driver, an amiable driven driver? Yeah, thoughts about that? Or is that
You
That
take
makes
on what you're
perfect
given.
sense to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now that means something happens when we get into the danger zone that blows that totally, all of its great value and benefit totally out of the water. And we'll need to talk about what that extreme is. Obviously, we know it's all the words we know that we find here. It's arrogance, it's all that, crazy risk-taking behaviors, etc. We know that's all going on. But what triggered that? Because now the thresholds are being so compressed or something or other, squished, that this person is allowing no wiggle room whatsoever, no range of deviation at all. So I'd like to talk about this idea that as we move to a healthier and healthier spot, I don't want to use that word. As we move to a more and more energetic spot, expressed spot of the driven driver energy, as we move in that direction, the thresholds are coming down. That would mean that any movement in the outgrid direction should be influencing those thresholds to join the heart line. Huh. Okay. And that would mean the further away I am, the more in-grid I am, the more the thresholds are likely to deviate. Huh.
I'm going to ask a question, T, around this because I'm looking at it and listening to what you're saying. I'm wondering, and this is going to sound crazy, I'm wondering if those thresholds actually cross.
Oh, yeah, I've always wondered, do I need to be in the upper hemisphere for a threshold of activation to occur? Do I need to be downgraded for a threshold of delegation to occur? Can't I get stressed out and finally delegate something, or I have to be stressed out before I delegate it? Or can I be taking action that threshold of activation can be when I'm downgraded and mellow? So I've always thought, Kathy, that we could say that the thresholds can occur anywhere on the change grid, but wherever they occur is going to feel very different.
But I was thinking that as you're talking about 1010 and how healthy that is, that maybe as you go beyond it, that's when they start crossing. They literally, it's like they go in the opposite directions. That's what I'm saying about thinking that might be a crazy thought. I just wanted to throw it out.
Welcome to our world. We are the world of crazy thoughts. So, but that would mean that if I'm getting into the danger zone, it may be because I am delegating too much too soon and doing too little too soon.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay, that's definitely worth playing with theoretically. Do you think any of us are ever going to sell that piece of info to a client?
But I imagine you can have different, just like when you go to a physician, they're looking for baselines, right? That's what is worked on. So everyone has different baselines. But I imagine as we're moving along the change grid, you just don't move straight up. You go through different points of engagement, and so there'd be different baselines to reconcile itself.
Yes.
Along those continuums.
Yep. All right. Well, good conversation, everybody. Let's see. Oh yeah, Shags, go ahead and share a weekend dad joke.
Why is it that keeping tropical fish at home can have a calming effect on the brain?
I have no idea.
All the endorphins.
Oh my God.
Oh,
It's not a dad
that
joke.
is a dad joke. That is a dad
Write it down and send it to us. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye.